What happens when a group of people must work in the middle of nowhere with virtually no supervision or accountability? Generally, it's not a good situation, as Kate Beaton, now well known as the creator of the webcomic Hark, a Vagrant, found in her younger years when she got a job on Alberta's oil sands in a bid to pay down student loans. This week, Kumar and Dana discuss her memoir of the experience entitled Ducks, 2 Years on the Oil Sands. First, if you appreciate the work we do on deconstructing comics and our other podcasts and want bonus content, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Our monthly issue-by-issue look at 1960s Amazing Spider-Man comics is available to patrons chipping in at least $4 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics.
This is Kumar.
This is Dana.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Kumar in Melbourne, Dana in Fredericton, Keswick Ridge, I should say. I guess you're outside city limits.
Sure.
So we're here to talk about the very recently released Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands by Kate Beaton. I'm going to say right out of the gate, this was an awesome book, but it ruined me. And I read it about a week ago, and then this morning I said, okay, I'll flip through it again before we record, and just flipping through it, it ruined me again. But we'll get into all of that. I want to say it's a huge book. It's over 400 pages. And nothing about it was what I was expecting. So I know Kate Beaton as being one of the funniest cartoonists there is, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And she did these really hilarious webcomics for years and years, and that's how I knew her. And they were very two-dimensional, very quickly drawn, sketched out cartoons that they're well-paced. They're exactly what they need to be to deliver these hilarious gags. And when I heard about this book, and then I saw the reviews coming in that was like one of the best books of the year or whatever, and based on the title, my assumption was that it was going to be that she, in the last couple of years, when we haven't heard much from her, she went out to work to do like a reportage, like Joe Sacco went out to do some journalism on the oil industry for whatever reason. She's like Jim Carrey or Robin Williams. She's like, okay, I'm a serious actor now. I'm going to go out and do this serious book. That's not what it is at all. It's actually about her. She went out there. She worked there for 2 years between 2005 and 2008. So before she became a famous cartoonist. I don't know if she considers herself a famous cartoonist, but she's famous in my mind anyway. She occupies a large space as a famous cartoonist in my brain.
Yep.
So this is when she was very young. She's like 21 or 22. She just finished university. And it's drawn in a much more lush style and fully realized style with a lot of three-dimensionality to it. And a lot of shading, and it's not at all like her gag comics. So I shouldn't have been surprised at how well she can draw, but I certainly was dumbfounded, and I was surprised by that the plot was not about. And the next thing that surprised me was, even though it was about 2005, 2008, it wasn't about the oil industry really. It was about her and her experiences out there, and we'll get into all that kind of stuff.
I think first and foremost, it is First and foremost, it's a memoir.
Yes.
It doesn't stop there, but absolutely that is, its main.
Yeah.
Yeah, its main thing.
It's just about what happens to her. She doesn't go interview a bunch of people about what happens in the oil industry or about fracking or anything. It's not about any, really, I think until after page 300, we really don't get any kind of glimpses into that kind of stuff.
Yep.
I do want to say another thing that popped into my head was I worked at McDonald's from like 91 to 97. And I don't remember anybody that I worked with or anything that happened in those 6 years. I couldn't tell you the names of anyone, the faces. They're all 90% of that was all gone. And there's some her amazing level of memory going on here. And maybe that's the way an artist's brain works, that she can kind of well, she's made up some names, of course, but still she remembers all these incidents. Well, there's reasons for remembering all the incidents as well. We'll get into all that. However, you brought this book up. This is yours. Now, I kind of heard it was out there, and I was even thinking about doing it on the show with Emmett, and then you were like, hey, I bought Ducks. So how did you come to the decision to buy this big, expensive book? Hardcover.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't even a question. I think it's kind of funny, the timing of the last episode that we recorded together, the EC Artisan Edition.
Yeah.
I had kind of discovered that one in the comic shop news pamphlet thing, and yeah, said, hey, let's do this. Let's do this for Deconstructing Comics, and you were like, yep, awesome, let's do it. And then I think it was literally the next day or 2 days later. Mm-hmm. I think it was on Reddit. Somebody had posted, or I saw something. I don't know where it was. Yeah, it must have been on Reddit. But yeah, somebody had posted here, Kate Beaton interview in Wired. I was going to say Wired magazine, but that's not a magazine anymore, website. And yeah, they were interviewing her about this book. And I was already was a fan of Kate Beaton from Hark, Vagrant. And yeah, I mean, it wasn't even a question at that point. As I say, I was a fan, and just the title, like, holy crap!
Yeah,
Kate Beaton doing a serious memoir about working in the oil sands. That sounds like a book I want to read, and that was it.
Yeah,
that was just a matter of waiting for it to, because it was on back order when I ordered it. But yeah, it's a matter of waiting for it. That was it.
Yeah,
and yeah, it did not disappoint at all.
Yeah. So right off the bat, first couple of pages, I mean, well, we get some maps of Canada and stuff. So she's from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, which is our neck of the woods. And,
yeah, pretty close.
So she comes out of university. She's 21, 22 years old. She's done a BA in fine arts. And her parents are like, why don't you go to nursing or something? Or why don't you study something else? And she's like, no, this is what I wanted to do. And she comes out of it, and she knows... As soon as she comes out, she knows there's no job prospect. She knew that when she was doing it. And she comes out of it, and she's like, she has no regrets about what she chose, choosing to do the fine arts degree. It's what she needed to do and wanted to do. But she faces the reality of not being able to find a job, especially in Cape Breton, which she depicts these, it's basically like single houses and empty fields, or like a lighthouse. Like there's no job for her with her BA in fine arts out there. And she's immediately feels burdened by the student loan. She feels crushed by it the second she finishes school.
And I think that this, too, just to kind of interject there, that this is something that a lot of people, even from Fredericton, where we're from, it's kind of the same thing. I mean, there's this line early on that she says, where she's from in Cape Breton, it's a have-not region in a have-not province. Now, Fredericton is certainly not a have-not region, but New Brunswick is definitely a have-not province.
Yeah.
And I mean, I went out west looking for work after university, and I'm not alone in that. How many of our friends did the same thing? Right? So
she says, there's a line in page 8, says, in 2005, Cape Breton's main export is people. It's not a unique story in Atlantic Canada. I was like... Yeah, and I felt too. This is the first 10 pages of the book. I was immediately like, now I didn't have the student loan issue personally, but for me, I was in computer science in my first year, and I was like, I can't do this. My soul is saying, don't do this, and I switched to the English Lit degree, and I knew the whole time. I was like, there was the whole like placement program in computer science and stuff, and I walked away from all that. I was like, I know I'm doomed at the end of 4 years here. And I really felt it. I felt exactly what she was going through. And this wasn't even the meat of what this book is about at all.
Yeah.
But I was totally like right away, I was like, okay, I'm feeling this. And then, I ran further. I went to Japan. Like I was like, this is how far I have to go to get work.
Yeah.
So she finds out about working in the oil fields, or they're called oil sands. I can't remember what that means exactly. She's got like 4 or 5 sisters. She's got this huge family.
Yep.
But she's like, what am I going to do? Well, I'll just go out there to work for a little while in what's called a tool crib, which is, I guess... It's interesting in this book that there's a lot of jargon, and she doesn't explain it a lot.
Yeah.
Like, a lot of people just come in and say stuff, and you don't really understand what's going on. Anyway, it's basically, I guess, the workers come in and they need to request, like, to rent out or to loan out certain tools, and she signs them out, and they bring them out, I guess,
Yep.
and she's basically working in a shed way out in the middle of nowhere. So she lies to get this job. She says that her father owned a hardware store. But basically, the thing about the tool crib job is you don't need to have any experience. You don't need to operate heavy machinery or anything like that to get one of these tool crib jobs. She's like, I'll do this until my student loan is paid off. I can't remember, somebody in her family or a family friend has gone out there to...
there's a few, I think.
Or
but
people that say, hey,
definitely
you can go do
one
this.
couple that her parents say, you have to go there for Thanksgiving and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
But
that's right.
there's a few, I think a few family friends, but definitely that one.
So she writes down the word tool crib. So I have to say, at this stage also, where I'm looking at page like 26, 27, it's already unlike any Kate Beaton we've ever seen before, because she's got these 9-panel grids or grid pages, and the shading's completely different, and the characters are still cartoony, but there's a lot more. The backgrounds are really lush and realistic. She's drawn in everything in there. So she writes down the word tool crib, and then you turn the page, and then there's this page which really floored me, and it was when I knew this was the page I knew we were in for something really different. There's 5 panels on the page. The first 2 pages are just her standing barefoot in the sand on the beach with her ankle cuffs rolled up. The surf washes in and washes over her feet, and we get this beautiful full-length panel of the cove that she's standing on in Cape Breton. There's no sign of any civilization except for her. Then she looks up at the sun and she covers her eyes, and there's a line of shading over her eyes. It's not something we've never seen from Kate Beaton before. And then we see that she's looking at a bird flying in front of the sun. Now, I stopped dead in my tracks at this page. So this is when I knew, okay, this is not an expose of the oil industry. This is something else. This is about her.
Yeah.
And also, I was struck by the page because it was so unlike anything we'd see. The depth of perception of the cove, and the tempo of the waves washing over her feet, and the shading over her eyes. I was like, okay, this is something very different. And it's almost like she knew what our expectations of her were, at least for me, like she's speaking directly to me. Like, I know what you think of me, because look what this page is, and made me stop on this page, because this page comes back 3-4 times in this book, and you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know. Pay careful attention to this page. I did. I stopped on this page for a long time, and then I was like, whoa! It came back multiple times for distressing reasons later on. But these panels are repeated later in the book, and it's almost like she read my mind and knew how to make me look at. I guess it's not like the previous pages in the book, which are full of dialogue and like a lot of 9-panel grids. Maybe that was it, and there's a suddenly we get the silent page.
Yeah. It's just it's like, sit up, son. Pay attention.
Yes.
I got a story for you.
Yeah.
You mentioned the rhythm there too, and that was something when I was going through this book the second time. I was really just flipping. I was just like flipping the pages because I'd already read it. I knew it was happening, so I didn't need the dialogue. Yeah. But yet going through it like that, it was really astounding how on point she is with the rhythm of and these kinds of pages, they come up every once in a while and they just stop you, or she speeds it up, or she slows it down. I mean, there's no question. This is one of our contemporary masters of cartooning in Canada. No question. Right?
Absolutely. And also another thing that struck me is on the previous pages we get she's got these accents, the Cape Breton accent and the speech mannerisms down. And just the weird turns of phrase, like in New Brunswick we would say it's some good, like if something's really good, it's some good. All that kind of stuff is in there, and it's so you have to pay such close attention for 25 pages, and then we get to this sudden silent page, and it really maybe that's how she's managed to slam it in there like that. So she flies out west to Alberta. And so we get another silent page, a parallel to the earlier page. On page 33, she arrives at Fort McMurray, and we get all these buildings and like 4-wheel drive trucks, and there's no people around. And it's such a immediate contrast to the Cape Breton page where we had zero civilization on that beach, and her and a bird. And here we got maybe some trees, but there's no wildlife, and there's no people, and there's no warmth. And she shaded them in a way that's really, even though it's only like a few tones in this book, it's so harsh when she arrives, and we get these 2 pages of just buildings with no people or no life.
And that last panel at the bottom right, she's on the phone.
Yeah.
And you just get this,
I made it. Yeah.
I mean, the tone is that you can hear the tone. And she just arrived.
Yeah.
And she's already, I don't want to say she's already regretting it, but she's already,
she's a fish out of water.
It's not a happy, warm place.
Yeah. No. And I have to say, right. So she also gets a job as a waitress for extra, to make some extra coin. So right away when we get to these buildings, this stuff wasn't so bad, but once she starts working, so she gets up, she has to get up super early, like 5 a.m. to catch a 6:05 bus. Again, when we get this bus, we get these views down the bus and the bus driving along. Again, I don't remember ever seeing Kate Beaton do stuff this 3-dimensional before. There's kind of a beautiful shot of the city lights as she's leaving to go to the refinery or wherever she's going out to this.
Yeah. And
now I start to get nervous. I started to feel uneasy. All of the workers are really... So she's working behind this counter. People come in to sign out gear. She's working with another woman. She's learning the job. But every dude that comes in is this kind of flirty joker. Right? And she's starting to get her railroaded into going on dates with some of these guys. Even by her female coworker. Who's kind of making excuses like Kate's like, that guy's really old, and this other worker's like, you got to marry somebody, or there's all these excuses for them, or why don't you just see this guy, he's a nice guy or whatever.
Yeah, he likes you.
Yeah, but meanwhile, whenever she's at the payphone or whatever, she's out on the street, there's always a 4-wheel drive truck that rolls up and somebody yells something crude, like how much, or how about a threesome. Or they're just yelling it out the window whenever they drive by. And it's just every guy that comes up to the booth is like, they're making some kind of flirty joke. But I started to get this sinking feeling in my gut. And it's all, quote unquote, kind of innocent at this stage. And, we're 60 pages into it. She hasn't made any Kate Beaton, the author, hasn't made any kind of comment about the industry itself yet. But there's a great scene where she goes with this guy. This guy says, you want to see the buffalo? And he takes her out to see these buffalo in a field. And it's a great scene because there's just a couple of buffalo down in this field. And it's just surrounded by, like, these belching refinery, towers. And that's kind of it. Like, she's very subtle about it. That kind of stuff. Okay, so anyway, did you want to interject anything here before?
No, not yet. No, I've interjected when I needed to.
Okay.
Well, I guess on the topic of the buffalo, there are a few appearances of wildlife, certainly later on, but much later on with the actual ducks. But but there's that beautiful. I was just going to say that there's this beautiful kind of little episode with the 3-legged fox, which I think it's kind of a little bit of foreshadowing or something there. I mean, the fox seems to be fine, but it's a 3-legged.
It's a 3-legged fox, and she sees it and she says, "Get out of here! You have you stupid damn fox! You have 3 legs. This is an operating mine. What are you going to do when you lose another leg? What do you think is going to happen?" And she's out there in the cold. She's gone out to take the garbage out or whatever, and she sees the fox. And people have been telling her there's this 3-legged fox around. You ought to see it. So the first time you read the book, it's like, okay, what's this scene kind of doing in here? And you get to the end of the book, and you're like, she's warning herself to get out of here. This is an operating mine. Get out of here. I felt like. I do want to backtrack a couple of pages because 2, 3, 4 pages before that, she deals with this guy who says there was another woman who worked here, and some guy said, "I'd like to fuck you on that rag pile," and she got him fired. And this guy that's come to the booth is like, I mean, it's a stupid fucking thing to say, but learn to take a joke, right? Fucking crazy girl, probably making everyone miserable wherever she fucked off to. But you're all right, aren't you? And I was like, okay, here I'm starting to get really nervous around the next 350 pages of this. However, this is followed by another silent page. This is probably my favorite page in the book. Right. So on page, I guess this is page 79 or 78, 79, we get a picture of a clock. Now, normally in a comic, when you want to show the passage of time, you show the clock 5 times with the hour hand going around. She shows the clock once. She shows 3 guys. We get a corner of their face. It's 3 different guys, but it's the same. They've got word balloons, but the word balloons are empty because it doesn't matter what they're saying. It's all the same shit. It's all the same guy. They look a little different, but it's exactly the same.
Well, they're all saying different things.
But it doesn't matter. It's basically the same thing.
Yeah.
They're just asking for their tools, or they're making some comments about her, or whatever.
They're all making crude comments about her.
Yes. We don't need to see the clock 5 times. We see these guys 3 times. Then we get her taking out the garbage bag, and it's second to second. We see her dragging the bag, pressing the open button. The garage door starts opening. It opens a bit more. The amount of those first 4 panels with the clock and the 3 guys it could be 8 hours.
I'm assuming it's hours.
8 to 12 hours. Shift. It could be her whole shift. And now we get this garage door opening over 3 panels, plus the button opening, maybe 30 seconds. Astonishing. Yep. I was floored. And then we get to the fox.
And then the fox,
She's out in the cold, freezing cold. It's nighttime. She sees the fox. She warns the fox away. And then we get, we get full pages of like these monster vehicles that they use out here, these big industrial vehicles, and we get like this starry night or snowy night. It's really interesting. It shows up a couple of times.
So I want to interject about this vehicle. So page 84, there's one of these great big mining dump trucks and actually, I think early on, she goes into the garage, or maybe it's later on when she moves to another place. Anyway, there is a scene where they actually go into a garage, and she's standing next to the tire, and she's barely halfway up the tire, like her entire height. And that's how massive these things are. But you mentioned that cove, that silent thing before she leaves Kate Beaton, and I mean, there's just so many beautiful landscapes in this book. And on the same level, with the same love and care and rendition, are these mechanical beasts. And I think that this is a reflection of the kind of even-handedness that she treats all of the subject matter with. Yeah. Like you mentioned how she hasn't talked about the industry, and it's not a book about the industry, but it is. And it's about more than the industry, and we'll get to that. But the thing is that the same care that she renders the beautiful Kate Beaton coastline, she takes and renders these monstrous mining machines. And I really think that's very telling about her storytelling. And how she depicts these sort of scuzzy guys with the same care that she depicts her sisters. They don't all get the same amount of screen time. But she's not throwing anyone under the bus. And I think that's so admirable.
It's an interesting thing because a lot of times too we don't know what's happened until after it's happened. Like 50 pages later. Like we're getting to this very soon. We get to this page where we get an outside shot on page 95. We get an outside. She gets dropped off at the where she works, where she hands out these tools, and we get a shot of the outside. Now we haven't seen the building in which she works so far. This is the first time we didn't get an established shot 50 pages ago. We get it now, and it's just like a storage container almost. It's the most miserable, depressing little building. That she's working in. And she has this way of withholding information, so you don't know what's necessarily happening. I mean, she never explains the lingo, but later on, events happen, and we're like, wait, what exactly happened? Is she gonna tell us? And we don't learn about it until like much, much later, sometimes 100 pages later or something. So she ends up moving sites.
Yeah.
She moves it to what's called a camp. Now, this is important. So, where did this happen? So this Somali taxi driver drives her out there. And before we get to that, sorry, there's another thing that you mentioned about how she draws everything at the same kind of level. Car crashes. So cars skid off the road all the time out here, and then they're just overturned in the ditch, and it's just part of the landscape. It's just like she just draw that. People just drive by. They might call it in, say, "Hey, somebody's gone off the road," but that's it. Nobody stops for these people. So these cars are just out there at the side of the road, and she just draws them, and it's all, and like those monster trucks, that's just the landscape out here. So just give them a full page like you would the beach in Cape Breton. So I'm trying to find the page with this Somali taxi driver. I don't know if I wrote it down, but he warns her. He's like, out there. So at these camps, people come in from other towns or wherever to work, and then they go home. So it's like that phrase about what is it? Don't shit where you eat, or something like that. So it's like the opposite of that. Like, they don't live here, so it starts changing them. They start behaving differently, like they're immune, or like they're in another world where whatever they do doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Or where they're almost like all powerful or something like that.
Yeah, page 142. 141, 142 is the taxi ride with that guy. So the camps are the shadow population.
Yeah.
They live here, but they don't live here.
Yeah. It is the crazy men in the camps, is the words he say. Do you know how people treat a place where they don't live? Is what he says.
Yeah.
Fort McMurray is a town. I have young children there. People say bad things about Fort McMurray, but it is the crazy men in the camps. It's a very almost symbolic moment where he says the gate is as far as I can go. He has to drop her off at the gate, and then she's on her own once she crosses that borderline. It's a really, art. What's the word for? It's not art imitating life. It's like, it's just this perfect symbolic moment that probably really happened, where she had to walk in by herself. And then she goes down this hall, and she's, men are looking at her as she walks down the hall to her room. There's no other women there. There's like 50 men, and there's like one other woman working there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, then it's kind of the same thing. It's always, these dudes are always making comments about her, whatever. There's just a constant undercurrent of threat that I was very uncomfortable with. The whole time, especially once she's in the camp. We get the first mention on page 149 that she's kind of drawing comics in her spare time or whatever. Just for kicks. Okay, so we get more comments about you need to grow a thick skin or whatever. Anytime anybody says that, I start to get nervous again, because she's complaining about people are lining up, not for tools, but just to get a look at her. They didn't really need the tools, and she complains to her boss, and, he's like, just grow a thicker skin. You just got to deal with it.
That's just how it is.
That's just how it is. And this guy says to her, was it her? So her cousin is actually out there, too. I don't remember if it was him, but somebody says, she went out with some guy for something. He drove her to the pharmacy. She got a ride, and this guy told everybody else that he had sex with her. And the person that reports this to her says, "Come on, nobody believed him. He's an idiot, and you're way too mean, and you don't take any shit." And she says, "I'm not mean, and I take a lot of shit." Which, I mean, it says it all. Every line just says it all.
More on Kate Beaton's Ducks coming up. But first, a reminder to join us for 20th Century TV and music trivia quiz videos and more on our Patreon page. Every month, patrons donating $4 a month or more also get a full-length podcast episode reviewing an issue of The Amazing Spider-Man by Lee and Ditko and now Lee and Romita. Check out our goals and rewards at patreon.com/deconcomics. If you'd rather give a one-time donation, you can do so via PayPal by sending it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We appreciate your support.
Greetings from Wayne Manor Memoirs, a podcast dedicated to exploring the Batman mythos.
Each episode, we research a character, story, contributor, or piece of pop culture related or adjacent to the Dark Knight,
And try to understand why these topics are important to the Bat mythos. I'm Joe.
I'm Kendall, and some of our favorite topics include the transformation of Mr. Zero into Mr. Freeze,
The early appearances of the Riddler,
Booster Gold,
Commandi,
Jim Aparo,
and many, many more. Check out Wayne Manor Memoirs every other Friday, wherever you download your podcasts.
and follow us at Wayne Manor Memoirs on Facebook or at W Memoirs on Twitter.
Until next time, Bat Fanatics, be brave.
And stay bold.
Okay, so now shit goes really bad. So she goes to this party. This guy is leaving. He's gonna leave the job, or he's gonna go to another camp or something.
Yeah.
He's given up his contract anyway. His contract's finished. She's had a few drinks, I think. Or
Yep.
she's avoiding drinking. I can't remember. He convinces her to go back to his room somehow. Closes the door. He puts his arm on her shoulder. Then we get a page of 4 black panels.
Yeah.
I don't even like describing the 4 black panels.
No.
Then we get the next page, which is, again, it's 4 panels down the page. 2 panels are down.
That page there is so chilling.
So
It's this hallway. You got to get that image, which we've already seen the hallway when she arrived
Yeah.
here, and it's like the workers' dormitory.
Yeah.
And it's just a hallway with door,
Doors.
door,
Yeah.
both sides.
Yeah.
And the third panel down.
Yeah, it's the. Sorry, I just want to say it's like the Kubrick shot where it's just straight down
I
the three.
had the
three-point
exact
shot.
same thought.
Yeah.
Total
Yeah.
Kubrick. Yeah. So you get this exact same panel, but
Yeah.
the third panel down, one of the doors opens,
Yeah.
and it's just black inside.
And you see the blackness that you saw on the previous page where the panels were just black. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the first
And
full
then-
black we see on this page. Yeah.
Yeah, and then fourth panel,
She's
standing out on the hallway.
and she doesn't look happy.
in the hall. No, she's not. Of course.
And,
she just leaves, right?
Yeah, she leaves and then she walks. She just walks out of the party. She doesn't say anything to anyone. She doesn't hear what they got. Word balloons, but we don't. There's no words in the balloons. We don't see what she's. She goes into her room and then she slumps down to the floor against the door, and
Yeah.
we know what happened. We don't know what happened. We don't know if it was just a. Don't know if she's a virgin. It was her first time, or we don't know if it was just a miserable sex experience or what. But then we flip the page and then we get the feet on the beach.
Yeah.
And
the
those 2
seagull
panels
with
we get the seagull with the intrusion of the beeping of the her alarm clock to return to work. And then she wakes up in her. It's again 4 panels. Okay, so she returns to work. She's messed up.
Yeah.
She asked the guy she's working with, "Do you think you're different since you came here? Do you think the people are different at home than they are here?" And he says, "Of course they are. There's a rat cage." Now everybody who works here seems to know that it's a crazy place, but the scene with Leon is interesting. So she says people do things here that they wouldn't do at home. So at this stage, it's almost like she's trying to excuse this guy from the party last night. Like, oh, he's a different person because he's here or whatever.
Yeah.
And Leon says people are bored and crazy. And she says, but is that who they really are? Or are they who they are at home? And he said, what I think is whatever you took in school, they charge you too much for it. So it's very typical. Everybody always kind of dismisses things. There's rampant drug use out here, too, especially cocaine, because it apparently doesn't show up on the drug test because it leaves your system the next day or whatever. So everybody's doing it, apparently. There's another party. The same thing happens again with a different
10
guy.
pages later.
10 pages later.
Maybe not even 10 pages, but yeah.
Yeah. And she says, you don't even like me. So this is another thing that's happening is that I think it's 50-1 male to female. And a constant thing that comes up is because, especially when she first moves out there, is like she wants to be with somebody that likes her for who she is, not because she's the female that's present. But this constantly comes up. he pushes her down on the bed. He's just like, just shut up. I know you like me. And she's literally crying on the next page. And she has it's depicted as an out-of-body, or her mind, she has to go to another place, and she goes back to the beach. So on the next page, we get another silent page where she's standing there, miserable, looking out at the beach in Cape Breton again. We get a repeat of that panel. Maybe she's drawn as she is now instead of then. And
she buttons up her shirt in this vision out of body. Again, it's incredibly powerful writing.
It's just every single page. So she goes back to work again. It's like a month later. She's kind of seeing this guy, this other guy.
Yeah, right.
I think what was his name? Was his name Mike? Yes, Mike.
Mike. Yep.
She goes to work. Even old dudes. There's an old dude at work, Pat. Is ordering him. She demands some stuff from him. He's like, "What are you doing anyway, a young girl like you? All these lonely men willing to pay for a good night. You're sitting on a gold mine." It's just like everybody. It's just constant. It's nonstop.
Pat's my favorite though. I'm sort of sad that you
of the old gross dudes.
Part of Pat because that's pretty crusty, that one. But he's got my favorite line
sitting
in the book.
In a gold. Well, she has the best comeback, which she says, "Oh man," literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
She's still kind of got her sense of humor about her, which it comes out at times. There's a great sequence here in the shower where she's standing there on the next page. Her eyes are open. The shower is coming down on her. Then her eyes kind of dull to this kind of state that she's in, and then it's like a repeat of that panel. I can't believe how well it's put together. So her sister comes out, and one of her friends come out to work there too, and they don't really understand what's going on with her initially until she reveals that she was raped at this party. So this is like 50 pages later where we finally hear out loud what actually happened. Now maybe because I'm ignorant heterosexual male, I should have picked up as soon as she walked out. I mean, I was picking up that she was raped in the cubicle or whatever you want to call it, but until she really said it out loud, I wasn't 100% that that's what had happened. And maybe a different reader would have been, are you kidding? It's really obvious that that's what happened. So she tells her, because her sister can tell that something's wrong. She's like, yeah, that happened to me too. Then she decides to move to Victoria for a year, BC, and it was such a fucking relief for me reading this book. I was like, get out of there. Every page, I was like, even before the rape happened, as I said, I had this sense of dread. I was like, get out of there. Please leave. I was like, I know it's only 2 years, so I'm just hoping for this 2 years to be up. And I'm like, no, there's 300 pages left. My God.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. She moves to Victoria. She works at a art gallery or a museum.
It's a museum, I think. Yeah.
For a while, she's not that great with customers and stuff. She gets told off at work for all sorts, but it's kind of like fun. It's more like what most of us go through at these kind of jobs.
Yeah.
So it's more, and she starts doing the comics, and she starts drawing comics. And I'm wondering when I first heard about her, and if she was, when I first started looking at Hark, Vagrant, what stage she was at. And if this was, or was all that later than this, I'm not sure.
Right. Yeah. She does talk about LiveJournal in this book.
Yes.
So I don't think she had her own site.
Right. Okay.
But it sounded like at the same time that this was going on.
Yeah.
She had a LiveJournal. Now I don't know how much of that would have been produced while she was in those camps, or not the camps, but like at the oil sands. But it's possible. I can't really remember when I started reading Hark, Vagrant either, but it was definitely the web comic stuff. So but anyway,
so she's dating this guy. She goes on a date with this guy at least, and then she's like, she kind of pushes him away, and she's so wounded by what happened in camp. And there's this amazing page where Kate draws her, and her face is like almost melted on her pillow as she's lying down miserable. I think she must have deliberately drawn her so squishy and deflated like that.
Yeah.
So she's working in this, she's in this kind of the archive of this museum. I guess it's kind of a maritime museum or something. She's talking about going back to the oil. She still needs to make money so she's got to go back to the oil fields. But she's talking about this book called Helen Creighton: A Folktale Journey Through the Maritimes, which is the opposite coast. And she mentions about this book. She says, "Did you know she took out all the body stories from her collections because she didn't think they were fit to print?" It was written in the 50s. And she says, "It makes you wonder what was left out, though, doesn't it? It's nice, but it's not the whole picture, and what good is that?" And I really wondered, was she telling on herself? Or was she saying that I haven't left anything out in this book?
Yeah.
Because a few times she does comment, so for reasons that'll come up later, she says, well, she didn't meet any of the men that weren't making comments at her. She didn't deal with those men. The men that weren't lining up to get a look at her, she didn't deal with them. So,
yeah.
And she says twice, I only had a perspective. My perspective was that I was being constantly barraged by the guys that did line up to make comments at her. And, the guys that don't yell out the window are not the ones that she wrote about. So I really wonder what to make of this line. She's included this scene about this book and specifically about leaving things out of a narrative and it being, I don't know if she's saying I've left these things in, otherwise the book is no good without it, or is she saying there's other stuff in here that I haven't put in?
Yeah, it's pretty ambiguous, but it's definitely one of those scenes where you read it and you're like, okay, yeah, this is not accidentally or incidental. I mean, obviously, none of it's accidental. You don't just draw a page of comics accidentally. But it's not just incidental stuff. It's like, oh, yeah, this happened. I mean, this has got to be a very intentional, maybe metaphor is not the right word, but, she's clearly drawing that comparison between Helen Creighton and her own work here, but yeah, it's not really clear which statement she's making, and it may just be nothing more than that, but just to remind the reader that it's not all here, and you have to think about what you're reading, but you also have to think about what you might not be reading.
Yeah.
And maybe that goes back to my comment before about how kind of even-handed she was, even with even with her rapists.
Yeah.
I mean, she didn't really spend much time on them at all, and they didn't deserve any more, but she didn't paint them as monsters either.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think I kind of understand that from the present. Well, no, sorry. I gotta be careful how I phrase this. There's a point where she tells Mike about what happened. Yeah. And he's kind of, and another friend who are hanging out, and they're kind of like disbelieving, like, I bet you were drunk.
Yeah.
And she's like, I was, but really, and like, gross, you were loaded. That's not the same thing. That's regret, is what they say about it. And she's like, it doesn't matter. And she's almost kind of, I don't want to get someone fired, or everybody would hate me, or whatever if I got him fired, or there's all this kind of, boy, it's so complex. Like I of course she reacted like that at the time. She's completely traumatized by it. And now it's it's funny the way that her even-handedness, because it's almost she doesn't even have to be even-handed, to the extent that shortly after this, there's when her sister and her friend show up, there's a guy trying to look up their skirts in the cafeteria. And he's literally he's got his head, imagine sitting at McDonald's and somebody's got their head, they're leaned over trying to look up under a table up a woman's skirt. Just imagine it. Like, she doesn't have to comment on it, she just has to draw it. And then the girls are like, gross, like, is that guy trying to look at my skirt? And they're like, yeah, like, that's what they do here, kind of thing. And she says wearing skirts should be normal, but it's not here, I'm sorry. And her sister says, why are you sorry? So she almost doesn't have to comment on things. She just has to show them happening. It's like, holy shit, this is... Yeah. She just has to pace it out the way that she knows how to pace it out. And that kind of covers all the bases.
And then maybe this little scene talking about the travels around the Maritimes is just that reminder to the reader, like, sorry, folks, it's not all in this book.
Yeah.
And you just need to remember that it's not all in this book.
Yeah.
This comes back later there's a conversation with I think it's Lindsay, her friend, where they're working together, and Lindsay writes an article.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
For like a small paper.
This is after she comes back. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's online, and she gets all these like hateful comments, and some of them from women, and she's really struggling with like these comments who are they're blaming her for painting Fort McMurray in a bad light and giving the town a bad name, and you're only talking about the bad things, you're not talking about all the good things, and she's really being persecuted for having a perspective. But of course, that's not what internet commenters are doing. Internet commenters are just being angry, knee-jerk internet commenters.
Yeah, it seems to be like early days of internet comments, because they seem surprised by the quote-unquote level of discourse.
I think everybody is. I think anybody who like actually puts themselves on the internet, even today, you don't think you're going to be shocked. But then you read your first comment and you are shocked. You're like, I didn't think it was going to be like this.
Right,
I mean, right? Because the depths of a human
I seem to recall 2005 to 2008. I was like, geez, these YouTube comments are really awful. Maybe I don't know.
Yeah.
But they seem kind of innocent and naive about it. Like, oh, this will be fine. Oh, we should mention before this too that this is so before this we get this incident with the ducks. Now, the previous 300 pages, the guys sometimes call the girls Ducky. And I thought, okay, that's why this is called Ducks. It's because of the girls that work in the oil field. That's why the book is called Ducks. But actually...
Isn't that the Newfies that call them Duckies?
Maybe, yeah.
Because I think that's a Newfoundlander thing.
Right. Because there's a lot of Newfies working out there at this in Alberta in the oil industry. So there's this incident where these ducks get caught in some kind of toxic waste trap or something. I can't remember exactly what it is, but they get caught and die, and it's like 300. And because of this, there's kind of international outrage, get reported internationally, and this is the first time the company has to pretend to show accountability.
Yeah.
And it's the only time, and this is so we're almost 300 pages in here where we finally get some kind of...
It's over 300, but it's like on page 329 of my copy.
And I feel like that's finally where, here we're getting a bit of commentary on the industry.
Yeah. And this is also, we get a scene with Selena Harp.
Right.
Who is a Cree elder who Kate Beaton saw a video of an interview. I actually watched it today as well.
Okay.
This interview that she watches on YouTube with Selena Harp. And she's just talking about how the First Nations communities are just surrounded by these mines, and they weren't consulted about what was going to happen to the land around them, and they're being poisoned by the pollution and so on and so forth. So it's really, here we are over 300 pages in, and
you got a double whammy.
She does deal with it. Don't worry, folks. She is going to talk about this, but it is still, you've got those 300 pages of kind of memoir. It's about Katie Beaton. But,
And there's all these car accidents happening on the highway that finally is mentioned, like where fatal collisions are happening, head-on collisions and
the
stuff.
highway of death.
Yeah, apparently I'm sure all these guys are coked out of their minds, really, probably as well. Yeah, and her skin's going bad, and it's just like the other ones. Oh yeah, that's just what happens out here. You get bad skin. Oh, we haven't mentioned besides the landscapes and stuff. Once in a while, we get drawings of like the Northern Lights. And it's really, so this to me was fascinating in terms of cartooning, because this guy, especially the second time, one of her coworkers shows up with some pictures he's taken of the Northern Lights, and he shows them to her, and so she's looking at them, and then she flipped the page and you get the 2-page spread of the Northern Lights, the Aurora Borealis. Now, my thing was, so this is a drawing of a photograph of a color and motion spectacle. And she's really conveyed the awe of it in duotone colors.
Yeah.
And there's a rainbow later on, too, a 2-page rainbow. And I'm like...
2-page spread of the rainbow. But the Aurora
especially, like, half of the thing is how it wavers in the sky, and it's like all the colors and stuff. And for her to be so gutsy as to, I'm going to draw this in a comic book and it's going to be awesome, that's some serious cartooning right there. That was really amazing. So she does that a couple of times, which we haven't mentioned. So very close to the end, page 396 or so, rapist number 1 comes back, or is it number 2? Number 2.
Oh, yeah, I think
it's number
which one.
God, I don't care which one it is.
One
I
of
hate
them.
these guys. Anyway, he's just like, hey, yeah, it's you, Katie. I remember you. What's your name again? And then he's like, oh yeah, Katie, I remember you. And I think this is the guy, right? This is, isn't it?
I think so.
I don't know. I hated it either way.
Yeah.
They've got a replacement coming in for her. So she's finally quit. Phew. Okay, so she's finally quit, and they've got a replacement coming. The replacement's getting paid more than her and has no experience. So she goes into her office to the boss, the real boss's office, to complain.
Yeah.
And this guy is this is the climax of the book, really, is the speech she gives him about how I can't complain because I'm a woman. And it will only make things worse for me. And he's like, oh, I can do something. What was your boss told you to grow thick skin? I can do something about it. He's got a pen in his hand, and she swats the pen out of his hand on page 404. It's really astonishing. It was my favorite moment in the whole book when she's like, it doesn't matter, I'm not asking you to. She's put that pen down. She swats it out of his hand. I loved it. And she says, why would I ever come to anyone after that with anything? And she's angry that she wasn't paid more or treated better. And the guy says he's sorry. He sounds sincere, but really he's an oil exec. I'm not sure how much it matters. And he says, I hope you feel that you can say something about these things. And she says, I think you must know how it works, and it doesn't work like that. And she leaves. She goes to this party, and there's this great panel at the end of, maybe it's her farewell party or just a party, where she goes all blurry. The drawing goes all blurry as she kind of fades out of this life and then goes back to Cape Breton. And then we get some beautiful vistas. This guy owns this farm, this field, and she's looking out, and it's like, he's gone out to work in the oil fields.
The guy's son,
and she's like, oh, I'm gonna saving it here for when he comes back. I'm gonna put a house on it, and she's giving him the side eye, literal side eye, like, oh boy, I don't think that guy's coming back. And then we get the most upsetting sequence of the whole book, the last 3 pages. God, it was everything. I was so upset both times through this book. Okay.
Oh, in Halifax.
They're in Halifax. They're back in civilization. They're walking down the street. I'm like, finally, she's fucking free. This is the end of the book. Thank God she's back. She says it's weird. She says it's weird being a normal place. I feel weird, don't you? To her sister.
She's with her sister.
She's
Becky,
like, okay, they're walking down. It's almost Christmas time, I guess. It's snowy or whatever, and it's wow, finally freedom. She's out of all that shit. She's away from all those dudes and all that crap and the pollution and everything. And somebody walks up, this dude walks up and says, do I know you? And he was like, oh, you're up in Fort Mac. And so it's like, oh no. So immediately my heart sank, like, oh shit, it's followed her out here. All the way out to Halifax. Thousands of kilometers away, it's followed her. And he's like, all the boys were hot for you have no idea. And we had a bet on who could sleep with you first. And her sister laughs, says, that's crazy, wow. And he says, well, it's great to see you. Hopefully we'll catch up with you at the bars tonight. And she says, yeah, I hope so, totally. And then their other friend who are locals are like, what the hell was that? Why did you let him talk to you like that? And that's the last line of the book.
Yeah.
Because the reality is they are corrupted too by being out there in the camps away from civilization in a different way, in their own way. They've been ruined by it. And Kate's kind of looking... The sister's looking in shock at what her friends has just said, and Kate's looking despondent, kind of off into nowhere.
Kind of angry,
but it's a silent... There's no more words in the book. That's the last word before the afterword. It's the reality of how... it's not, as we said, it's not really about the industry. It's about how that industry affects human brains. And those working conditions and allowing that behavior to persist and going through all that out there, and it's just such a, much like the taxi driver dropping her off at the gate. It's such a perfect narrative moment.
Yeah.
So it followed them home, and it followed them. It didn't just follow them physically; it actually followed them in their brains. It's still in them.
Yeah. And I it's not really part of the comic itself, but it was even more of a just kind of a heartbreaking ending in the I don't know if it was an afterward. Yeah, I guess the afterward, to learn that her sister here actually died from cancer while she was making this book. So, I mean, there's a lot of sadness and a lot of trauma and darkness around this book, and yet there's also so much of the other stuff of life. Yeah. And in that there's the friendship and the love of family and the people that she met who weren't terrible monsters. Like Doug is another great character who is filthy and kind of as nasty as any of them. Yeah. But she has a relationship with him. Like she has a connection with him where he kind of gives her shit, and sometimes he even gives her shit in a bad way, and she gets pissed off with him. But again, like there's a human connection there. And there's that guy, I think, that's quite strongly suggested that he was a drug addict. But her last boss, Ryan, I think was his name. He's from BC. He's looks like a biker. He's got daughters. He kind of suddenly disappears from work. Yeah. And it's pretty strongly implied that he was an addict. And
it seems like he was like a good guy, like he was kind of on her side, and then he vanishes, and then it's like, he was a cocaine addict or whatever. Yeah. And it's just like you don't know what the secret side of these guys is.
Yeah, and that I think that's so beautiful that she is. It's not just like her trauma and her pain, but she's taken the moment to say, all these people who were there were, as you said, people were changed by it, and good people were damaged, and so that was a really good example of that. Was that Ryan guy that was treated her decently, had daughters, had a life and had a character, and he was another human that was there and was kind of destroyed by it. He
certainly wouldn't have become a cocaine addict if he wasn't working out there, but it just seems like everybody out there, it's a bubble universe. It's just a completely different existence. As a postscript, I wanted to add that I have a very close friend who works in the oil industry in Canada, and I usually, if anything comes up, I don't usually talk to her about it if it's like industry related, because I don't know, I just know not to bring it up.
It's like your Christian friend, you're not going to talk about religion.
Yes, I've done it like once
friend.
or twice, and it's like, okay, I know not to have this conversation with this person.
Yeah.
But after reading, so I didn't mention this book to her. I read it, I was like, boy, I wonder if she's heard about this, or people are like her bosses are saying this book's a bunch of bullshit, I don't want to see anybody reading it, or what. Or something like that. I don't know. I didn't know. I was like, should I even mention it to her? But after going through it again this morning, I said, I really had to. So I texted her. I was like, have you heard of this book? And she's like, no, what's it about or whatever. And I kind of told her. And she was like, she told me some stories that I don't want to repeat. Nothing as bad as what happened to Kate, but still almost getting there. Could have been. If things had gone differently.
Yeah.
And it was really upsetting. So I don't know what the takeaway from this is. This is literally a zero solution situation. I mean, how are you going to stop these people from doing it? How are you going to make them accountable? Unless there's a public thing like the ducks. Unless you can somehow prove that the toxic waste is causing cancer and killing these people. It's just nothing. It's prime capitalism. It's just it just feels unfixable. Like I don't know, unless the oil runs out, that would be the only thing that would maybe reverse any of this situation. If there was zero oil there and there was no money, and then they shut down all these industries, then maybe that would be a solution. But it seems like there's no mental health support for. It should be mandatory whether you need it or not, because obviously you do need it. You just don't realize it. It seems like from the way she's depicted it out there.
Yeah. So I think this book that really for 250, 300 pages is almost exclusively a memoir about this Kate Beaton woman who tries to pay off her student loans by working in the Alberta oil sands. By the end of it is a book that is absolutely about that, but it's also about the failure of corporate Canada to support its workers, and how this industrial machine is chewing people up, destroying their lives, destroying their humanity, destroying the world around them, destroying the lives and livelihoods of the Indigenous people of Canada. I mean, this book, at the end of it, it becomes about all of those things.
Yeah.
And in such an incredible way that, I mean, it doesn't offer solutions. I think that's one of its strengths. But holy hell, does it ever hit hard?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, the level of cartooning here is phenomenal. Absolutely top tier. But it's a triggering book. Like, very. Yeah. It's really full on. I don't know if there's anything else we want to say about it. Everything you've heard about it is true. It is, one of the best books of the year, and probably of several years. That's about it, I guess.
Yeah, I want to leave with my favorite Pat moment.
Yeah. Okay.
So Pat is this kind of walrus-looking old dude.
Yeah.
And she ends up working with him a few times, and page 301, he comes up to the tool crib, and Kate Beaton says, "Okay, Pat, what do we have today? What's the order?" Now, I can't do this, but I want you all out there to imagine. Pat's from Newfoundland.
Okay.
All right? He's an old dude from Newfoundland.
Okay.
And he says, "Ain't got no Jesus grinding discs in this Jesus cold as whore in here. Lord Jesus, tell Decline to bring my lunch bag. Oh, Jesus, Lord Jesus." And I read that with appropriate punctuation. Oh, my God. Pat.
Okay, that's perfect. We'll stop it there.
Sounds good.
Ducks, 2 Years on the Oil Sands is published by Drawn and Quarterly. You can help the Deconstructing Comics family of podcasts by joining us on Patreon at patreon.com/deconcomics, and go to deconstructingcomics.com to connect to us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube, to shop on Amazon to support the show, and to find links to subscribe to the podcast. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read it and record our critique. Happy New Year! My move is complete, and I'm hoping to more frequently show up in the body of the podcast and not just the announcements in the new year. Till next week, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.